Seconds to go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the public forum. It's the 29th of January 2024, to our first public forum of the year. Public forum's purpose is to allow members of the public to express their views on particular items on tomorrow's council meeting agenda. My fellow councillors and I welcome and thank each presenter for taking the time and effort to present to us. I remind all people attending this meeting that it is being webcast on YouTube with audio and vision. A recording of the meeting is available on the internet and is required to be available for 12 months. Private recordings, including taking photographs by members of the public gallery, are not allowed. This ruling is to maintain the integrity of the meeting proceedings. Please ensure all devices, like mobile phones, are on silent mode, please. On behalf of the Council, I welcome all people to the public gallery and observing live on the internet to this public forum. I acknowledge that this meeting is on Dunghutti land, and we pay respects to elders past and present. We also welcome any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people with us. I now call for any conflicts of interest declarations from councillors or staff. There are none, thank you. Attending the public forum online is Councillor Arthur Bain, Councillor Scott Butterfield on my left, Councillor Anthony Patterson, Councillor Dean Soil, Councillor Kerry Riddington and Deputy Mayor, Councillor Alex Andra Wyatt, Councillor Kinney Ring, and Councillor Simon Ferguson. Council staff in attendance are Mr. Craig Milburn, the General Manager, Mr. Wes Trotter, Director of Utilities, Mr. Michael Jackson, Director of Operations and Planning, Mr. Steve Mitchell, Director Corporate and Commercial, Mr. Daniel Thorogood, Group Manager Governance and Information Services. I would now ask the General Manager, Mr. Craig Milburn, to outline the guidelines for this public forum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reading from Council's Code of Meeting Practice. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to address the council. This time will be strictly enforced by the chairperson. Speakers at public forums must not digress from the item on the agenda of the council meeting they have applied to address the council on. If a speaker digresses to irrelevant matters, the chairperson is to direct the speaker not to do so. If a speaker fails to observe a direction from the chairperson, the speaker will no longer be heard. A councillor, including the chairperson, may, through the chairperson, ask questions of a speaker following their address at a public forum. Questions put to the speaker must be direct, succinct, and without argument. Speakers are under no obligation to answer a question put to them under that clause, and if they do choose to answer it, questions time frame is limited to 1 minute. Speakers at public forums cannot ask questions of council, councillors, or council staff. When an address made at a public forum, sorry, that's the wrong one. When addressing the council, speakers at public forums must comply with this code and other relevant codes of council. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breaches of the council's code of conduct, or making other potentially defamatory statements. If the chairperson considers that the speaker at a public forum has engaged in this type of behaviour, the chairperson may request the person to refrain from the inappropriate behaviour and to withdraw unreservedly apologise for any inappropriate comments. Where the speaker fails to comply with the chairperson's request, the chairperson may immediately require the person to stop speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. We have 2 speakers this afternoon. I remind each speaker you are presenting information which may benefit councillors in becoming better informed on decisions they have to make at the council meeting tomorrow. You may not ask questions. Some councillors may want to ask you questions to clarify your presentation at the end of the presentation. Our speakers are Mr. Mark Walker and Mr. Lindsay Key. Our first speaker is Mark Walker. He's speaking against 6.1, special rate variation application supporting documents. Mr. Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, councillors, council staff, my fellow ratepayers and residents. I understand and accept that the extraordinary council meeting tomorrow is essentially about dotting I's and crossing T's to meet the application deadline to IPART. And so there really isn't time to change anything much. But nonetheless, I have some points I'd like to raise and perhaps provide council with the opportunity to respond. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the Engagement Results Public Exhibition Report. I am of the view that this report does not contain every submission that was submitted to council, and I find myself asking, why is this so? I myself submitted a document opposing the SRV as part of the engagement process, and yet my submission does not appear to have been included. Having discovered this, I have subsequently been made aware that others have noticed that their submissions to KSC on the SRV also do not appear in this report. If I could draw councillors' attention to page 14 of the business paper accompanying tomorrow's extraordinary meeting, where the following appears. Submissions, 121 submissions, parenthesis, 80 online through Your Say Macleay, 41 emailed or posted to KSC. Having looked carefully through that voluminous document containing all the responses with some care, I am unable to find a copy of the submission I made, nor of the submission made by at least one other person. These being emailed submissions, not those made directly via the Your Say Macleay community engagement portal. And so I'm left wondering how many other responses have not been recorded or included, and still wondering why. I was also able to identify one of the Your Say Macleay responses that was not included, and several more that appear to be only partially included with attachments not downloaded or accessed. I think it pertinent to also note at this juncture that there is nowhere that I can find any acknowledgement at all of the legally constituted and delivered petition opposing KSC's SRV plans collected and coordinated by the group Figure It Out KSC. As they have received over 10,000 signatures opposed to the SRV, I would have thought that this should have been included in any documentation being sent to IPART, even if only so that KSC is not embarrassed by being asked to produce it by IPART at a later date. Community engagement is still community engagement whether KSC likes the results or not. It might also be pertinent to acknowledge that another petition is about to be circulated, also opposing the SRV application, and this petition is being conducted by people with a much better grasp of the financial reports and methodologies of KSC and critical of their misapplication in justification of the SRV. Along these lines, I think it worth mentioning that, as many of the submitters pointed out, KSC has made assumptions about how it should manage its income and expenditure based only on the necessity for an SRV, the argument for which I and many others remain unconvinced. In fact, KSC even acknowledges this in the business paper, where in the second last paragraph on page 12, the following appears. Should council be unsuccessful in its SRV application, then immediate action will be required to ensure ongoing financial sustainability. Without an SRV, a significant reduction in the levels of service and quality of assets would be required for council to remain financially sustainable. Yet nowhere, anywhere, at any time, have I seen or heard anyone from KSC offer anything like a plan B. Surely to God, if the provision of the SRV is so crucial, and yet IPART's agreement so uncertain, that some research into alternative options might already have been identified. My takeaway from this is there is no plan B. It's SRV or bust. What this means is that KSC must needs go back to the drawing board and start this whole sad sorry process over again, starting from scratch, to attempt to find the solutions that the residents and ratepayers already know we want, yet council is not willing to entertain. What do I mean by this? Simply that, as the vast majority of submitters and the 10,000 signatories to the petition have stated, we don't want the SRV. Figure it out, KSC.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Councillors, you've heard the address by Mr. Walker. Do you have any questions for him? Councillor Ring, please.
Yeah, I just had a question. So were you saying you made a submission about the SRV from November, or are you talking about you made a submission to the documents that have just been on public expedition?
So sorry, your
So
microphone's off, Mr. Walker. Thank you.
Regarding the SRV, opposing the SRV.
Thank you. So it's not on the documents. Okay.
No.
Thank you. Another question,
Yeah, I
please,
just want a
Councillor
clarification.
Wyatt.
Yeah, I just want a clarification of that one too. And saying in the SRV the submission that you made it as for the November 2023 meeting or for the one tomorrow?
For the November meeting. And as I understand it, and I think you might have even told me this yourself, it was printed and provided to councillors, yet it doesn't appear in the document going to IPART. I'm assuming an oversight. I'm not suggesting anything untoward.
I think there needs to be some clarification, which hoping council will provide, because my understanding, there's two things here. One is the documents that were done in November 2023, are they supposed to be here? But you didn't make a submission specifically for tomorrow's meeting.
Yep.
Like in these documents here, 6.1.5, which has got like 180 pages.
The community engagement process was more than 1 month or 2 months. There were several calls from council for the community to provide their input regarding their opinion of the SRV, and it could be done either via the survey online through Your Say Macleay, or by typing into the form on Your Say Macleay, or by uploading to that form, or by sending an email or a written letter directly to council. And I now know of several people who did the latter, whose submissions don't appear in that document, despite the fact that the document itself says that those submissions have been included. So I guess I'm seeking clarification on that.
Thank you. Yeah, so at the end of the question time, Mr. Walker, we'll have some clarification from staff on the issues you've raised. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I think Arthur's got a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see Councillor Bain had you have a question? No, you don't.
No, that was all right. It was just continuing that clarification of the engagement.
Yes, well, Councillor Bain will have that at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Keys, please. You have 5 minutes. Welcome. And Mr. Keys is speaking against item 6.1, which is special rate variation application supporting documents. Thank you, Mr. Keys.
Just prior to my time, the name is Kay. I thought moving to the Macleay might fix that, but apparently not.
I apologise to you, Mr. Kay. Yes, you're right. I should know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. There is little to be gained from getting into the particulars of how we got here and who is responsible. Where we go from here as a community is far more important. What is clear is that an SRV is not part of that journey. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. After over 10 years of SRVs, Kempsey Shire Council has increased debt and made no forward headway. Rate income is not an infinite resource. Ratepayers have effectively reached their capacity to pay.
Mr. Kay, sorry to interrupt you, but we have to be talking about the documents which you, in your outline, you're going to be speaking about that, not on the whole general SRV. So
I'm speaking to the document.
No, the documents that are in the report in 6.1.
Yes.
Okay, we'll continue, but if you keep pertinent to that, please.
Rate income is not an infinite resource. Ratepayers have effectively reached their capacity to pay. We currently pay more than comparable shires. The number of retail businesses in our shire is in sharp decline. Less money in local pockets means less money to spend at local shops. Our shire is one of the most disadvantaged for economic indicators with the lowest household incomes. Our shire has high and increasing rates of crime. This is a strong indication of socio-economic disadvantage. We have a high and increasing rate of homelessness. The measure of a society is how it treats its weakest members. There are 5 papers. I'm going to address them all, starting with attachments 3 and 4. These are the hardship provisions, including the ability to recover unpaid debts. These are unsuitable in the circumstances, as an inability to pay now will only be exacerbated by interest charges, and there remains the spectre of increased charges. The general rate is only about 1/3 of the total rate bill. Furthermore, there is no appeal. The final arbiter is the general manager. The only area where there is a deferment requires subsequent repayment from an estate. Attachment 4 has a threshold of $100 for recovery action. This might include the forfeiture of rated property. This doesn't mesh well with the principle of, and I quote, achieve flexible alternatives to legal action where possible. The section in the agenda talking about public display and transparency for 3 and 4 is about as long as the provisions themselves, and despite talk of plain English and significant recent revisions, they remain hard to read and provide no actual financial support, only deferment. It would appear to now be harsher than prior. The new updated friendly revision, I quote, additionally, hardship arrangements would generally be for a shorter period, up to 12 months, rather than long-term arrangements. That's on page 11. So a bigger hammer applied more often. This is not how a community should treat its weakest members. Section 5, however, is the meat. I quote, didn't provide critical analysis of the draft documents. Yes, it did. Saying you are paying X dollars and having to pay X plus Y dollars will starve your pets is critical analysis of the draft documents. It needs to be mentioned that a significant minority of the critical analysis was to mention the poor nature of the Council's communication to date. Section 5 is poorly written in response to heartfelt pleas for compassion. What is more, it fails to expend sufficient care in redacting the submissions. Several phone numbers were left unredacted. Is it disingenuous of me to suggest that if this is the level of care shown in considering the submissions, they may not have been read carefully? Here, let me insist. Respondent 2, Beck L, took the time to carefully read all the exhibited documents and provided considerable, detailed, critical analysis. She was ignored and included in the general dismissal of agenda, page 6. It should be noted that the majority of feedback received from the community during the exhibition period was critical of the November 2023 decision to make an application for the SRP and didn't provide critical analysis of the draft documents. Beck L, you deserved better. Stacey Collingwood wrote, I'm living week to week. I don't have the money to pay any increase. Please listen to the people. We beg you. We just cannot afford it. She deserves better. Christian Tuark offered his time and expertise to fix the problem. He's not the only one either. He deserves better. Greg Stoneham wrote 13 pages of detailed professional quality analysis, a reasonable amount of which focused on how poor the quality of KSC communication and transparency was. He apparently wasn't up to snuff in outlining a way forward. He actually was. He deserves better. Julianne Hopkins responded with a well-written and researched critical analysis where she pointed out how much this SRV would curtail her living arrangements and drive an already very frugal person under. She deserves better. Julie Coburn took the time to read and respond.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. That is your time. Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Kay, please? Councillor Wyatt.
Can I just ask him to repeat one section of the speech that I didn't get?
Well, you could ask him to clarify.
I'm just asking if you first, if that's all right. You mentioned after you sort of said, after you outlined all of the information about, and then you concluded with disadvantaged community, you then you said something about the hardship policy. There was no appeal process, and you made a couple of other points. And I just wanted to clarify. I couldn't write them down quick enough. So I got no appeal process, and then you said 2 other things.
Could you turn that microphone on, please? Thank you.
Yep.
I don't think I need it.
Yeah.
The final arbiter is the general manager, was the next point I was going to make.
Yep.
And the only area where there is a deferment requires a subsequent repayment from an estate. So if you're a pensioner and you get it off your rates off on your pension, then it comes out of your estate. There's no actual, you have to pay no matter what. Is that all you wanted to have?
And then you mentioned a threshold of $100.
Yes, that was next. A threshold of $100 for recovery action that might include the forfeiture of rated property. And I said that this doesn't mesh well with the principle of achieve flexible alternatives to legal action where possible. I mean, I don't know whether anyone here has done legal action recently, but I'm sure $100 doesn't pay for the phone call.
So you're suggesting your comment around that is it's pretty low. It's pretty low threshold.
Pretty
Very
low.
Exceptionally low.
So
Yeah.
it is
Okay.
out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Any other questions, Councillor White? No. Any other questions, councillors? No. There's no one else, so I thank you very much, Mr. Kay. We'll consider your submission, and
Yeah, we'll make a couple of comments. Yeah.
So before I conclude the public forum, I'll ask staff to do some clarification of some of the things that were suggested by our
please.
speakers.
Thanks,
Mr. General Manager, please.
Just a couple. Firstly, to Mr. Walker and Mr. Kay, if I've noticed you're both reading, if we could get a copy of that, we're happy to circulate your speeches. I noticed, Mr. Kay, I don't think you got to the end of yours. That way the councillors could actually get a whole copy of what you were presenting. So if you're happy to do that, we're happy to actually circulate that to the councillors as well, so they've got a full copy of it. I'll just ask Mr. Mitchell just to clarify in relation to the matter that was raised by Mr. Walker about the submissions and their inclusion to IPART and when things go to IPART.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to clarify in relation to the submissions and the point that Mr. Walker made. From what I understand from Mr. Walker's presentation, his submission was in November, and so all of those submissions that were received as part of the first engagement process that we did were included with the November council report. So what's been attached to this report has been the submissions that we've received on the documents that have been out on exhibition. So the exhibition period that started after the November council meeting and continued through into January. So just to clarify, there are two different exhibition periods. All of those documents that we've received were reported, if they were prior to the November council meeting, reported to November and attached to that council report, and all the submissions post that in terms of the current exhibition period were attached to this council report. All submissions that have been received and the petition will be included in our application to IPART. So everything that we've received in terms of public submissions will be included in what we provide and submit to IPART when that application is made by Monday next week.
I'll just finish.
If we decide to proceed, yes.
Well, you have.
If the documents go ahead, that's the point I was making. Thank you.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of other.
Mr. General Manager, please.
Yeah, just a couple of comments in relation to both presentations. Just in relation to that threshold, the threshold is set at $100 because it actually needs to capture things such as the non-rates debts the council has. It's a debt recovery policy, so it covers those things. So if people haven't paid for their inspection fees and things like that, it needs to be set low enough that those can actually be followed up. And it is at that level and in those small amounts, that would prompt potentially a phone call. It's certainly not going to prompt legal action at that level in any way, shape or form. We are very fortunate that we have a very, very small percentage of our ratepayers that are actually needing to be followed up to that level. The overwhelming majority of our ratepayers actually pay their rates, and we are able to work very, very constructively with them. Mr. Walker made the comment that he used the phrase that we must be so uncertain about the IPART's decision. We're actually fairly confident that when the application goes in IPART, that we have met the criteria for IPART to actually approve it. We have done a lot of work in this, and we believe that it stands up to the criteria. That still will be IPART's decision in the end. in relation to if they knock it back, we actually had a discussion with the mayor even just this morning. If that is not approved, then yeah, we will be workshopping with the councillors. We've already had discussions with the councillors about what are the options of services and other expenditure cuts that will need to be made. There has already been preliminary discussions in relation to those areas, and it'll be something that we'll need to work with this and the council that will be elected in September to do, should IPART not agree to the rate rise. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our public forum. I thank everyone in the public gallery for attending today. And I'm sure the councillors have been listening carefully and will take into consideration what has been said to them. So thank you very much for your attendance. And Mr. Walker and Mr. Caillou, if you would like to present your speech to staff, we can certainly proceed with distributing that to councillors if you wish.